Welcome, everybody. My name is Indy, and that gentleman next to me is Mr. J. Powell from the Powell Group Consulting, and this is Friday's episode. Well, it's always Friday's episode of Indie Game Business. So happy Friday, everybody. Today, our special guest is Lauren from Square Enix, and if you don't know what Square Enix is, that's the old school name for Square Enix. I don't even know if people use that anymore.
I know they do. I just didn't know if we could use it publicly. That was the...
Oh, well, I'm a rebel, right? Look at me. So the title of today's episode is Indie Game Publishing and what working with a publisher could look like for an indie team. But you know what? We're just going to scratch all that because I know nobody wants to know anything about that. And, oh, wait. April Fools? Oh, it's not April, is it? No, we're going to talk about that.
So, Lauren, welcome to the show. We're going to start in our favorite place ever and tell us how you got into the industry initially, and then walk us through what you've done up to this point.
Oh, right. Okay. I feel like that's kind of a boring story, to be totally honest.
It's never a boring story, trust me.
So I didn't start, I guess, when I was a youth, I didn't imagine that there was a place for me in the games industry, or indeed what the games industry looked like. When I left university, which ironically, I did a degree in media production, and I am a producer now.
Lauren, can you unmute in Discord, please?
I am unmuted in Discord.
Oh, wait. I have you muted. That's why it's a red line. It's me. Never mind. Never mind.
Like,
never
okay,
mind. That's why I tell everyone to slide the volume down because it looks muted to me. And oh, my goodness. Never mind me. I'll go back to what I was doing.
So you have a
degree.
You hear me now? You got a degree in media production, and now you're a producer. So, okay.
But those two things, there's like, about 6 years between those two things happening, and they were not connected whatsoever. When I left university, I worked the kind of normal rubbish graduate jobs, just kind of like one after the other, going from one miserable job to the other, until I finally ended up working as a... what was my job title? It was like a financial administration remediation something. And at that point, I had enough. I had absolutely just, I had to my back teeth. And I had a couple of friends who worked in the games industry. Obviously, I've been a lifelong gamer myself. And my friend who worked at an indie studio said, hey, we might be looking for an intern. And I was like, quit my job, moved back in with my parents. I was like, I'll be your intern. Like, just teach me everything you know. And yeah, I started at that small studio. I think there was about 10 people there when I started as an intern. When I left almost 4 years later, there was about 40 people working there, and 2 studios, one in Newcastle, one in London in the UK. And that's when I moved to London myself to join Square on the collective team. And I've been there ever since.
It's funny because we always... When I was doing the publishing thing 20 some years ago, like QA was always where our producers came from, because there is no track back then anyway to being a producer. And so if you were in our QA or evaluation team and you could communicate on any basic level, I mean, the bar was pretty low on the communication side, but then you would just like randomly get bumped up to producer when we had too many titles for the other producers to, go from. How did you learn all the basics about how to be a good producer?
Yeah, I mean, like, firstly, I totally agree. I think QA is a great place for people to identify whether they want to work in production, because in QA you have such a good you get a great sense of where a game goes from start to finish, and one of the most key processes in the production pipeline, as well as I think most QA people are really, really good at time management, task tracking, detail orientated, which are all things that I think make a good producer. But for me, I've always been, I guess, like, motivated, nosy, and a bit organized. So although I originally started as an intern programmer, I was thinking maybe I'll be a programmer. I wasn't very good at that because I'm not very smart, but I was pretty good at keeping on top of what everyone else was doing and helping people unblock their problems, which is when I started assisting with the production process, helping track the status of the games that we were working on and the client projects we were working on, as well as being a literate email writer, I guess. And
Again,
you know, I mean, the bare minimum, to be
far
honest.
low, yes.
Yeah, and you know, I guess from there, I just started taking on more and more responsibility. And as the studio grew, we needed to add more process. That's when I started doing more reading around what producers do, like more general project management stuff, which people use in like software development as well, trying to apply that to our processes internally in the studio. And I did like a Scrum Master course as well, which was pretty cool. That helped. It was great that my studio sponsored me to do that. And you know, I've just learned everything that I've learned on the job. You know, hopefully not failing upwards, but definitely making mistakes and learning from them, but getting better every time, I think.
And that's the reality. That's why we do, you know, this show and these conferences and everything, because that's where a lot of us ended up learning this stuff. It's like I was a producer and then an executive producer on titles, and you know, like you, I'm not the brightest, so I've tried the programming side. That was not going to work because it has math in it, and I don't do that. Then I'm not overly organized. I love setting up processes, and then I forget all about them and don't use them. So that was never going to work either. So that's when you get to be a consultant. You don't fit into any of the other stuff. So how much, I mean, there's so much more that goes along with being a good producer. You've got to keep the project on track as close to on budget, on target, that sort of stuff. But you've also got to keep your team in a sane scenario and manage personalities and people as well. Yeah. How much of that did you end up learning on the job, and what do you feel that breakdown is between we're keeping this much of my job is keeping the game on track, this much of my job is to make sure my people don't burn out and, you know, lose their minds?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I don't think that anyone has all of the right answers for how to do that, because even with the same team, different titles and different stages of production, there's different challenges that you have to attempt to overcome. And I think the best way that you can do that is, for me, was just always leading with empathy and, you know, trying to work with people if there was a blocker they were having, whether that was in their role or in their personal life, that was, you know, kind of try and work around and with people rather than just work through them, which is often forgotten, especially when deadlines are looming. Yeah, and you know, one thing that's like hard learned is when is the right time to like stand up to like senior leadership as well. This isn't old stuff that's like necessarily relevant in my current role in publishing, but stuff from working like in indie development itself. You know, there are times where I think that if you feel like you've exhausted every route that you can to do what you were told that you needed to do, there is always room for pushback, and you know, got to stand up for your team. And if the team's not happy, then at the end of the day, they're not going to be doing the best work that they can. So yeah, it's hard. I don't think there's an answer to that, honestly.
But no, that's a fantastic answer to that, because that's exactly, you know, what has to happen. And one of the other parts that goes along with why I'm not a producer anymore is a lot of times I don't have that empathy that you need to be able to do it. But my friends who I was good enough at it that I never like got completely fired for it, or they kept pulling stuff on me. But it became a running joke that, you know, I would, because I was doing the business side too, and I would sign a deal and then go, hey, we got this new game to produce. And James is sitting there looking at me going, I'm already producing 3 games. And I'm like, you can handle it. Don't worry about it. And so, I mean, having that ability is something it's very key to, you know, getting the job done and getting it done properly, because it doesn't do a project any good at all if everybody's fried and exhausted. And at the same time, yeah, you've got to go and, stand up and fight for your team. And had the luxury of working with producers who were not afraid of doing that. But that's not something that's a good fit for everybody. I mean, you do need to be confrontational from time to time.
Yeah, it's a mix of like being confrontational and having good conflict management skills. And I think, like, not to like segue it a bit, but this is
But
where
the show is complete segues.
Oh, okay. But like one thing that I think is really important and like super does help with exactly what you're talking about, kind of like burnout, meeting deadlines, like conflict is if you have a diverse team, you have people who have experiences from different walks of life, or people who are in different stages of their life. Some people with kids, some people with perhaps whether that's disabilities, mental health, different personal circumstances that you need to be taking into account, and in order for them to be able to deliver the best work and excel in what you hired them for, and whatever it was you identified was awesome about them in the first place. And they can't do that if you try and measure everyone with the same stick, right? And getting that feedback from various different kinds of people will help you continue to run empathetic and healthy team, rather than like, not every game studio is going to be your like 5 mates who graduated university and are at the exact same stage of life from the same background. And when you try and expand the team and bring new people in, you're wanting to bring them in for like their talent and their creativity and their hard work and drive, but they're not at the same place. You have to work with them to get the best out of them as well.
So how many of this is always, because I know the number in my head that we used to always dump on producers. How many game projects do you typically manage at once?
In my current role, I'm managing two right now. But it depends on the size of the project and also where the project's at in its life cycle, right? There are some projects that are going to be winding down where there are not like massive amounts of work to be done. Some projects ramping up where you're not quite there yet. I wouldn't want to be in the middle of 3 at once, but I could be handling one in the middle, one at the start, one at the end, as long as it's all balanced.
But that is always the trick. So you've got a wonderful insight into the mind of an indie developer. You worked as an indie developer. Now, the games that you work on with Square Enix Collective, it's not necessarily Final Fantasy. It is the smaller.
It's definitely not.
So
to be clear,
what skills, especially if someone is coming out of university or wanting to get into the job, or they're in QA somewhere else, they want to get into production. We've talked about communication and attention to detail and empathy. What other skills, either hard skills or soft skills, should people have if they want to take this route as well and be a producer for indie teams, indie games?
Producer indie teams. That's a good question. I think communication skills are probably the most important for a producer. One analogy that I was like doing a talk for like a indie startup cohort last month, which was really interesting. A lot of the questions were really illuminating for me in terms of the kind of things that indie teams are worrying about. And but one of the analogies that I made when I was trying to describe to them the role of a producer in a team is that, like, if game development is this engine and artists, writers, programmers, UI, game designers, they're all different various mechanical parts of the engine, the producer's just the oil that makes sure everything doesn't get clogged up or stalled, and it makes sure everything is running smoothly, because without it, you could get from A to B with your car and that engine, right? But like, it's not going to be a smooth ride, is it? And it's probably going to smell a bit, and it'll take a little bit longer, and it'll be harder to drive, definitely.
That is a wonderful analogy. I mean, the part you left out there is that the entire engine could seize up on your way to wherever you're going, and
Yeah,
it never
and
happens.
it'll cost a lot more to fix as well.
Yes. Yes. That is a fantastic. I had never heard it described like that, but yeah, that is actually a fantastic, which, goes into another segue, and probably should have started here in the first place, but whatever. Why do indie teams, if it's just like 3, 4, 5 people, why do they need a producer?
That's like also a question that we get asked all the time, and because when you're an indie team and you're either working on your own budget or an amount you've raised, it's obviously the most important thing is to make sure you have enough budget to cover the resources needed to take the game to the end of development, right? And a producer tangibly doesn't necessarily contribute to making anything on that title. However, when you come to communication between different team members, scheduling, making sure that there are no blockers and no one person is blocking another person from doing their tasks, down to if you want to work with a publisher, there are a lot of admin overheads, I guess, that a publisher will need from you, and there's a lot of stuff that goes into making a game that isn't making the game if you want to get that game out to market. So if you're working with the publisher, and I feel like I'm just saying this from my own experience as working at a publisher, is the things we need from the teams are we need milestone updates, content that goes with each milestone deliverable. We need someone who's responsible for understanding what the QA and delivery pipeline is for builds from them to QA, and what the process is, making sure that regression is being done properly and someone's taking a look at that. Localization as well, legal too. If there's, for example, if you have any third-party assets in your game, like who's the person who's taking responsibility for making sure you're not breaking the terms of service by having those in your game when it gets released, and you're not going to get like your ass sued like later down the line for not having the right legal lines. Just lots of stuff like that, stuff that might not sound important but kind of is. And our job as producers is to let the creative people be creative and spend all of their time working on making something awesome. And we do our best to help people do that, because not everyone likes looking at spreadsheets, and not everyone likes changing Gantt charts or things like that.
Did you update your Euro this morning? So yeah,
I update my Jira every day, Jay.
Yeah.
Every day.
So, a good question from Joe Gervais is the producer usually one of the original main team members, a third party, the social media lead, or are they usually the team lead / CEO?
There's in an ideal world, you don't necessarily want your producer to have a conflict of interest with any other roles that require an opinion or responsibility. You want to have your producer be objective in balancing not responsibilities, but balancing things that are important to make sure that the right things are moved on. But that's not always the case in indie development. Most teams wear many hats, and even on our team we wear many hats. I'm not just a producer working on the pipeline, like development pipelines of our projects. We also do a bit of biz dev in scouting and things like that. I would say in my experience, most teams don't start with a producer, and we have to ask them to hire a producer, or we have to ask them if they have plans to have someone take responsibility on this, and whether they've accounted that overhead into their development timeline. It's great to see when people do have producers, and if producers do take on another role, or whether that's a writer or a CEO, etc. But often no.
The worst combo that I've ever experienced personally was the producer who was also the game designer. So
Oh my
when
gosh,
everything
yeah.
comes up and it's like, oh, well, maybe we should do this feature. Well, then of course that feature got put in because that person was also the game designer. And then everybody else is looking around going, well, we need to ship this at some point.
Yep.
And
Mhm.
so, yeah, you do have to be very careful of that conflict of interest in there.
That's it, exactly.
So, well, that actually covers the next question I had on why getting a producer is probably a good idea, even on an indie scale. But this kind of gets into something as well. It's important to go and make sure that when you're hiring a producer as an indie team, that there are other things that person's going to be able to do,
Yeah.
because it's not a 40-hour-a-week job to manage one indie project.
Mm,
Well,
you'd be surprised, but not
to
on
do it
every,
right. Yes.
not if you're working with a publisher, and you have like your team is like 4 people. You have like 1 artist, 1 programmer, one multi-hat person, and another artist or programmer maybe. I would still personally see there being enough work if that team went to a publisher and were being paid by a publisher to make the game, that there would be enough for that person to do on day to day. However, it's not going to be the right fit for every team. I clearly have a personal bias being a producer myself. I will always find enough work to do to make things easier for the teams that I work with. There's always more that can be done. And, if someone is a full-time producer, like you say, there's no reason why they can't necessarily contribute in other areas if that's what the team needs. But yeah, maybe I'm not the best person to answer that question because I'm pretty biased.
It brings up another good question, though. And explain the difference and how things changed when you went from being the developer producer to the publisher producer.
Right. So I would say, like, although I have the same job title, I don't do the same job. I had to basically learn everything that I do now in my role as a producer on the publishing side from what I did when I was part of the development team. So I guess to keep it extremely brief, because I think if anyone else is a producer, they'll know that this question could take forever to answer. I could go on and on and on. But a development producer, like we talked about before, looks after the health of the team, make sure the project runs on time, make sure no one's unblocked, manages the resource, manages the schedules, and tries to stop scope creep. Also facilitates communication with senior leadership or stakeholders or clients if they're working for a client. On the publishing side, I'm sort of the go-between Square Enix and, or whatever publisher you're working with, and the development team. So I work with the development team up to signing to make sure that the development agreement has everything. We do like due diligence, risk logs, everything during that particular process. But live on the project itself, I keep in touch with the dev team day to day. I do milestone approvals, so make sure the game is running on the time that we expect it to. And if it seems like it's not, I do everything that I can to help the team get back on track, or we adjust accordingly, depending on what the right route is. We are the facilitator of getting our games into QA. So we help work with Square Enix's AAA QA team, and we put all of our indie titles through that. So there's a lot of facilitating in that process, as well as when the game is ready for release. We facilitate the relationship between platform holders as well. So we talk to Sony, Nintendo, Microsoft to get the game on console platforms. We set it up. Some teams want porting help, so sometimes we are the facilitator between the development studio and the porting studio, making sure everything's running on time. Oh my God, there's a million things I do. I do so many things, and none of them are the same as what I used to do on the dev team. Yeah. We help them manage their timelines with marketing as well, because that's a whole other thing that publishers provide that indie teams can make use of, and they don't necessarily know where to put that or how to make the right time in their schedule for that as well. So yeah, there's a lot to do.
Lauren and Dan can see me like backstage laughing and grinning, but the rest of you can't when they have, because I love that answer, because as much as we get the question of, well, why do I need a producer? And I get questions from like our investor clients. So they're like, why do I need a producer? And I'm like, well, because somebody has to look out for your interest, in this process. So there is this whole, I don't know if I even need it, but at the same time, if you sit down like you just did and you listed everything that you do and you put it into a job description and posted it, you would get absolutely torched on the internet for assuming that one person can do all that. And it's like, that's too much stuff. But that's what being a producer is. There's a whole lot of it that people just don't normally see.
Yeah, and the best producers' work goes unseen because it means everything is going to plan. Everything's running on time. No one needs anything. No one's blocked. That's my goal, to be as invisible as possible, and no one has to hear from me.
So we've got a question from YouTube. Is it harder to find a publisher when you don't have a producer yet because they find that more risky?
No. Not all teams we work with or sign have producers, although that might be a recommendation that we make depending on our risk assessment or what we see when we do our due diligence process. Not having a producer it doesn't make it any harder if you can prove that you've mitigated the risk of having someone be able to manage all the admin stuff around developing the game, if that makes sense. And of course, I'm only speaking from my experience on the collective team. Perhaps other publishing houses might have a different opinion to this. I haven't ever heard of anyone saying that they wouldn't sign a game because the team didn't have a producer. And often, a lot of the people that we talk to in different publisher circles are like, the producers don't have anything to do with the signing process. We are quite an unusual case, actually. From what I understand, most indie publishers have, business development specialists, people whose job it is to be really smart at business. And they are not necessarily the same people who understand the importance of having a producer, what that will mitigate, or necessarily in tune with what a producer would look at a plan and see. But I can't speak to other companies' processes. So yeah,
it's not it's not that different. I mean, the good indie publishers do, but it's funny because what you just described is exactly what I did back in the day when I was bouncing between being a producer or an executive producer and doing the biz dev side of it. Is if you don't have that broader perspective on things, then you're going to go, as the business person, you're going to go sign a bunch of deals and you're not going to have any support for it. And on the flip side, if you're going at it straight from the production side, you may be signing some safe titles, but if they're not going to hit a market and make the right amount of money, then everything's doomed in the first place.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no, I was just thinking, I've talked with colleagues that I've worked with who in the past places they've worked, like you say, the game scouts or biz dev guys would just drop titles that they had signed on the producer's lap. And then the producer is just looking at this kind of burning PowerPoint presentation. Like, how can I do anything with this? It was doomed that in essence sometimes is doomed from the start. So, yeah.
God, I hope none of my old producers are watching this right now.
I'm sure they've had lots of therapy and they're over it by now.
Well, I mean, we would jokingly recall it, and I wasn't as bad about it as my boss was. But we called it seagulling because they basically fly in and shit on your project and then they fly away. And so that's or in my case, drop shit on your desk and then go. So Thomas from LinkedIn says, as an indie team owner, how much money should be dedicated to the average producer to ensure the project is profitable?
Oh, I mean, I wouldn't really have an opinion on this if I'm being perfectly candid. Surely the amount of money you pay your producer is relevant to what the project is, what work you're wanting them to do, and what geographical area you're in. The amount of experience that producer has. I don't know. I'm so sorry. That's a terrible answer. Depends on what you need. I guess I would say ask around, look for recommendations. Yeah, I'm not sure.
It's one of those things that, I mean, yeah, obviously where you are in the world and the experience level of the person is going to matter. But production is also one of those areas that you can bring someone who's never technically done it before, and they can do perfectly fine as long as they have the right soft skills. And
Yeah.
that's one of the unique things about production is yes, there are times that you can bring somebody who does have that good experience in QA or something like that. And if they have the right skills, they can do it. And it'll be a little cheaper. The important thing is that you have one and that they are good at it. That's the biggest thing.
I think if you were bringing someone with little or no experience in that specific role, my recommendation would be to still open up as much time as possible outside of working on development to work with them, to make sure you're continually having conversations about what isn't improving your pipeline. Like, producers don't want to add friction to the process, and that's a misconception that I've had from a lot of indie developers, some that I've worked with, more that I haven't, that producers don't do shit and they're just pointless because they don't contribute to the game being made, and they just add pointless process. And if your producer is adding pointless process, then you need to figure it out and stop that from happening, because all of the process should lead to less time being spent in meetings and less time being spent on documentation. Your reviews should be like smooth, and the results of those reviews should be clear for everyone to understand what the next steps will be, right? And if it's adding more time on and it's frustrating everyone and it's giving everyone more overheads, like, there's we joked about Jiras before, but like the reason why, like, I think lots of devs don't like Jiras is because they don't understand why they have to spend time doing this extra stuff. And it's part of the producer's job on that team to make sure everybody completely understands where their role is in the cycle and why every task that they're being asked to do matters. Because if no one knows what they're doing, then they're just going to obviously feel resentment, because, like, this is time I'm wasting that I could be doing something else, rather than, oh, I have to do this because it contributes to the wider functioning of the team. And if I don't do this, this is going to cause someone else time later down the line. That was a long answer. I don't remember where I started on that.
So it's all good. I mean, it goes hand in hand with that wonderful comment that I'm sure that you get at a lot of conferences with consumers, where you're not a real game developer, you're a producer. And it's
I've seen that said before, but I mean, I don't really try. I don't talk to players much, so I let the smiley, amazing, charismatic community folks do that. I'm not allowed.
It's one of the things that absolutely drives me nuts. And it's like, okay, yes, they did not code or draw anything, but they're literally the ones that get it to market. So, at the same time, yeah.
I absolutely applaud teams that are able to get through console platform compliance without the assistance of some kind of producer. Like, those guys are the MVPs, because that process is nightmarish. And these are all things that I think consumers just don't understand, which doesn't really matter. Like, for that reason, it doesn't bother me, because
So Alex, is so much work sometimes to make the task, because if there's no follow-ups, it's like 4 times the work to manage that.
Yeah, exactly. Like, then it means that the work you did to set that process up in the first place, that in theory should have made it easier for everyone, was just wasted effort. And again, you have to do more work on top of that to make it to fix it again.
So For the teams out there that have never actually gone through console acceptance, and I think Nintendo LogCheck is probably the most notorious. Explain where that attention to detail comes in when you are submitting builds to these different processes. And basically, they're all different, same sort of stuff, but they're all different. Explain a little bit of why that's important and why someone who is really good at that and specialized in it as a producer is going to be adding value.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like the real heroes in that situation are your like compliance QA. So the people who are doing QA on the project who know each platform's compliance regulations. I guess I don't really know how else to describe it, like off by heart, and they can go into a game build and they can like see everything in there that will or will not pass each different platform, because you know PlayStation has different things you need to do than Nintendo, than Xbox, than I mean Steam doesn't really care, but like there are some things that they'll be like maybe don't do that. And yeah, so while the QA people are doing like God's work in pointing out these things existing, if it doesn't get directed to the right people to fix, or it doesn't get given the right level of priority because perhaps a programmer doesn't think that this icon changing to each different platform to represent each different platform is a problem, because they would rather just have the same icons on each platform. You know, someone has to be the person to explain to them, well, we're not going to get it on any platform if you don't change that. So yeah, not that I think anyone would be like that bullish, but maybe it happens. But yeah,
it's absolutely one of those things that is far more important than a lot of people realize. But I think it's also interesting there that you brought up another point that people don't generally see behind the scenes: compliance QA, where that's not exactly the same as normal QA.
No, because so for us, we have functionality QA, which is what you would expect a regular QA is, like, you know, making sure that when you look at the sun, the console doesn't turn off or whatever, you know, just something, you know, that's kind of just your normal functionality QA stuff that they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. But compliance QA is obviously a complete different set of skills, because they have lists and lists and lists and lists of things that platforms require you to do in the game to be allowed to exist on their platform and to be sold on their various different console stores. And those are things that functionality QA are not going to be looking out for. And again, there's localization QA as well. So like when you've been localized into German and all of the text is like coming off the end of the screen, that's your localization QA team picking that up and making sure that everything fits in the boxes that it's supposed to. Very specialized guys, and like very, very necessary, and all very good at what they do to get stuff out on platforms. And like you say, some care more than others. Nintendo specifically is known, I think, less because it's like necessarily more, I think it's not necessarily more demanding in terms of like what they want you to do to get on like Nintendo eShop or like be on Switch, but like because they're just like slower. And I think that from my experience, the process is a bit more like, it's got more friction points, and you never like have like one person that you're speaking to. It's always, it just kind of like goes into an inbox, and and you never know who's going to reply.
Oh God!
So,
don't give me.
yeah.
When we were doing it, Sony was always the worst about that part, about how something gets rejected from person A, and you go back and ask, and person B is like, "No, it's fine," or it's the other way around. It gets passed on.
Yeah,
on B.
it does happen. Yeah, we had a really funny one on Steam a couple of years ago where, hilariously, I think maybe the first time in history, Steam said, no, this is not passed on compliance. We were like, excuse me? And they they raised an issue with the game, and we had the developers, the QA team, us, on the production team at the publisher, all looking for this issue, can't repro it. We send a message to Steam saying, hey, we're looking at this issue that you raised. We can't repro it. Can you provide some steps for us so we can find it and hopefully fix it? and they didn't say anything. They just approved it. They just approved the build. We didn't even get a reply. So it can be as random as that on any platform sometimes. And yeah, that's why having someone to manage it is really good.
So again, years ago, the problem with Nintendo as well was if there were 15 things that had to be checked and you failed the second one, they didn't check 3 through 15. You failed.
Right.
Go back. And so you have to go resubmit, hope that, number 2 is correct, and then hope there's nothing else in 3 through
Yep.
15 that are. So, I mean, it's not as easy as a lot of people say, oh, okay, well, we finished our Steam build, and so now we're just going to hit a button and export to Switch.
Press the button in Unity that publishes it on PlayStation. Yeah, exactly.
It's super, super easy. All right, so Thomas says, oh, wait, hold on. I missed one. So what should someone applying to a production position expect to show in their application materials? Oh, wow. Really good question.
We would, or for me, I guess, in my opinion, since you asked me, I'm always scared about answering questions like this because I don't want to give the misconception that like my answer is the answer or the answer that everyone would give or that every place is looking for.
It's okay. Just preface it with our catchphrase of "it depends."
It depends. I think that if you can have a proven track record of delivering projects, or if you are a graduate, you have worked on different maybe uni projects or game jams, and you have been part of that process from start to finish, you have an understanding of different areas of the process of game development, depending on which field you want to move into in production. Knowing different oh my gosh, not like now I know this because I do this every day. Like you don't have to know Agile, you don't have to know Scrum, you don't have to like what's the word I'm looking for? It's like the process of those things. I've literally done a talk on this before, and now I can't remember like project management.
Yeah.
Thingies. What's it called? I can't remember what it's called.
It's not discipline. See, now I can't think of either.
Methodologies. Yes. So if you have an understanding and you just can prove that you know what different methodologies are, that's pretty cool because that shows that you kind of know different ways to approach helping facilitate project development from different areas. Game developers love to say that they work in Agile, but like no, they don't, because like what game developers are working without a deadline. So and Agile is just endless iteration. So we do incorporate Agile, like elements of Agile methodology in game development. In the iteration is definitely the best way to get to a better product, but there's still waterfall cutoff points because you still have to deliver here. The budget will run out at some point, or people will only be available for a certain amount of time. So you have to have a cutoff point somewhere. You can't just endlessly iterate. That's a different conversation though. We're talking about wanting to know what people look for in hiring producers. That's right. Just like a general understanding of like, it doesn't even need to be team management because most producers probably don't manage a team. They're just part of a team in a different way. And that's another misconception, actually. I think lots of people think that producers are like managers or like their bosses, and some producers definitely act like that. A producer is like, unless they're literally like your line manager, they're not your boss and they don't have any authority over you, and they shouldn't. I think they should just be an equal part of the process to get things on track. But I think if you can just demonstrate competency in like organization, process, communication, being social as like, being like a social person and showing a willingness and ability to talk to different people, because you definitely will be just talking to people all day, whether that's like by Slack or email or on Zoom or whatever, to ask them really stupid questions. You can't be afraid to ask stupid questions as a producer. That's literally all I do all day. So yeah, does that answer the question? I don't know. I said a lot of things there.
No, yes, you did. I mean, a good producer, the producers that I've worked with over the years, you bring up a very good point of they're not necessarily in charge of the team. They are a member of the team. That producer needs to be on your site. If something is running behind or it's not up to code or whatever, yes, they need to be able to call it out, but they also need to be able to work with that team and find out what the issue is and help solve it, instead of just like running directly to management and going, hey, Dan is like so far behind on his programming that we're completely screwed and it's his fault and we should fix that.
Yeah, because it's like, well, what does Dan need to succeed in his role, and what have we not given Dan to help him achieve the tasks that we set him?
Yeah, it's definitely your fault. It's your fault.
But yeah, that's the big difference. Have you ever seen teams rebel against and fire the producer when they did not like the direction the producer was going, even when the producer was helping? There's a good question coming here. I can see it on your face.
How do I phrase this? I've seen things, and heard things, similar to the question. It obviously depends on the person, right? Because I can come out here and say all producers are amazing and you will never fail to ship something on time with a producer, which is obviously false. And I could even say all producers want to do is help you, and they're all like, coming with an open heart, and they want to empathize and understand, because that's not true as well. There's a lot of assholes out there, and a lot of people who come into the production role because they think that it will make them the boss, and people don't have a good time with that. And I've seen things like that happen. Yeah.
But it is a lot of it is, it's like any other position on the team. If College has a good example here, someone who just shows up every day and basically irritates or destroys everybody's mood, whether that's the producer or the art director or whoever it may be.
Yeah.
Yes, but a bad producer is going to get discovered.
Yes,
quickly.
Because often they have to operate in the open, right? A bad producer, it'll be obvious because sometimes things go wrong, right? And sometimes there are many factors to being unable to deliver on time, or features not working as intended, and delays after delays. And those things, can be attributed to individuals in the team, or they could be the fault of the producer, or it could be no one's fault. It could just be a culmination of those circumstances that everyone is trying really hard to avoid and learn from each time. And you could be being hit and beset with blockers from unexpected angles, like it could be stuff like engine changes, like Unity putting out an update that breaks a feature in your game that they don't tell you an ETA for them fixing it, so you've got to decide whether, do we wait for them to fix it even though we don't have a date, and it could be a month, it could be 6 months, or do we put time aside, spend 3 months right now developing a workaround, and then be 3 months delayed? Sometimes there's just horrible situations that come up that no one has an answer to, and no matter what you do, things will go wrong. And maybe it's the problem of the producer, but producers aren't we do our best to read the future, but we can't actually read the future.
I feel like that was a good answer to the next question that I was going to ask. And, how do you prevent, or you just basically approach crunch when you're the producer?
Yeah. So like one of the things that I would do when I was in the studio and development studio is I would try and add as much like buffer time as I could get away with before like our stakeholders noticed. So time that's not necessarily allocated to any particular discipline or any particular task that obviously may cost the project, may increase the cost of the project or lengthen development time. But I know that something's going to go wrong somewhere. What if someone gets sick and we can't replace them, or someone leaves and we can't replace them? What if there is a technical failure that we cannot get around, or we need to spend time to get around? What if one of the features we planned that we thought was going to be awesome just absolutely sucks and we have to spend time to redesign that? Things are just going to happen and you never know what those things are. So all you can do is do your best to add in as much contingency time as you can get away with.
So how are you doing on time? Because I know you have a very important event to get to.
I do. Let me just double check.
We've got one super important question. I mean, this is like the header of all of everything right here. As a producer with Square Enix, what do you think would be a game changer with RPG titles?
Okay. So this is actually a great question because it gives me an opportunity to clarify exactly what team I work on at Square Enix, because this is a huge misconception that people who book meetings with us don't really know what we do. So yeah, I work with Square, but I work on the Square Enix collective team. And what we are is we're Square Enix's indie publishing label. So I don't work on the big fancy Japanese roleplay games. I don't work on Life is Strange. I don't work on Outriders. I don't work on Marvel games. I work on the better games, objectively.
You work on the good stuff.
I work on the good stuff. I say this as someone who's been playing Final Fantasy since I was like 8 years old as well. And Final Fantasy 16. Oh, it looks so good. But yeah, so our team, we scout games made by indie studios all over the world, and do our best to find cool titles, invest in those teams for them to be made, and we help publish them on whatever platforms the team want. For example, our title, Little Goody Two Shoes, there's my sewing machine in the background, awesome, which is a title we announced in August that we picked up. And yeah, it means that we get to work on RPGs, but we also get to work on stuff like Power Wash Simulator, Game of the Year, I think so. We get to work on games like Circuit Superstars, which is a top-down racing game for motorsports fans. We've worked on visual novels. We've worked on tactical RPGs. We work on all kinds of things from like so many talented teams from all over the globe. And so I love RPGs. Like, I do work at Square, so I do love RPGs. But
and a little bit of top secret information. Right before this, Lauren was actually playing Circuit Superstars.
I was playing Circuit Superstars.
I'm calling you out.
For no reason.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I saw because on your Discord it says playing Circuit Superstars.
Does, yeah. Yeah.
But you have to. I mean, that was one of the comments I just made in Discord. It's like one of the things that I always look for in a good producer is someone who plays a lot of games, and not just like one genre, and not just video games. I want somebody who plays card games and tabletop games and all that sort of stuff too. All right, so we got time for one, maybe two more questions before we're going to let you go. But this one has jumped out at me, and I think it's an important one. Let's see, we don't have it here.
Is it Discord?
I see that communication skills, attention to detail, and organization skills are often listed, but it definitely feels like it is something easier to show off in an interview rather than like with a portfolio or a resume submission. For context, I'm a designer at my current studio, but I also act as associate producer since we're small. I'm applying to production jobs as our studio is losing funding. So I'm trying to figure out how the best approach to the job search is going to be from this perspective.
If you've already worked as part of a team, then you obviously have an understanding of what the processes are. I think leading with, your role as a designer, but what part did you play, or what is your understanding in, the overall piece of the pie that you were part of the whole pie? I don't know what I'm saying. It's really good when people come from other roles, because I think it gives them context of what it feels like to be on the other side of the fence, and you can come in with your own unique perspective about what would have made your job easier, and how would your job have more easily fit into the whole production, or the production as a whole. And in terms of, so I don't have a portfolio. My CV is just like the places that I worked, which is sort of like minimal bit, and then I list the projects that I worked on and my key responsibilities on each of those projects, as well as my soft skills and hard skills. And then I try and do most of my big talk in the cover letter. My understanding of methodologies, of process, of what it takes to deliver, and how I was able to what's the phrase? How I was able to do my job, and as part of something created by many. I'm not very eloquent today. I'm so sorry, guys. I don't
Monday,
even know
it's
that.
fine. You're fine.
It is Monday. It's true.
All right, so one more, and we're going to let you go. And I think we're getting some really good questions in here, and
Yeah.
I appreciate it. So, Popsicles the Elder on Discord says, besides project managed methodologies and some of the core stuff that we've talked about in terms of what are you looking for, what are some of the other disciplines you draw from to be a good producer that might surprise some people?
Oh, that's a really, really good question. I think everyone who has experience in any discipline can use their skills to be unique and effective producer. So my colleague Tom, he came from an art background, and like a game art background, and he has like such a unique perspective on giving like feedback and understanding the process of a game's like art pipeline that I just don't have. And it'll be the same with a programmer. Like if a programmer is looking at or someone who used to be a programmer is a producer now, and they're working on a production plan, they'll just automatically get a sense for how long programming tasks take, like what is like the how much what's like the engineering overhead's going to be on a game that is a single player versus multiplayer, like online, etc. They're just going to have so much more of an informed opinion that will allow them to give more accurate estimates in those particular areas, which is like a huge boon. Something that I think, again, people who come from QA, they have a massive advantage when they become producers and they learn the craft of production, because like QA is such an important part of the process that maybe some people forget, although maybe people don't forget it who work in development. Maybe gamers as consumers forget it. I don't think anyone who works in production takes that for granted though. But yeah, like they know what it's going to be like as part of that process, and they're going to have much more of an eye for detail when they get builds on milestone reviews, or if they're working in a development studio, if they're at the end of their sprint, like they'll have a much more keen idea of, how much is left to do in the QA process, or the bug fixing process, or the polishing process, that they can more accurately provide estimates for the rest of the production plan, which is just so cool and awesome. And I wish I had a single skill, honestly. I wish I did. But I do my best.
Well, Lauren, thank you so much for coming on and doing this, because it's fantastic. You're awesome at what you do, and we all appreciate the tidbits of knowledge. Is there anything that you want to plug before we roll out?
Put me on the spot. Go and we have a Twitter account, which is like Square Enix Collective, and also the game Little Goody Two Shoes is made by the team Astral Shift, so you could follow them on Twitter. They have a Discord competition going on at the moment as well. Please be excited. Yeah, I don't really. I'm not here to plug anything, so you guys do what you like.
Well, if anyone has any more further questions, Lauren's got a very important event to get to right now, but she is on our Discord server, so you can ask. We have an entire production channel right there. We also have tons of other very good producers in there as well that can answer your questions. But as always, want to thank our friends over at Tripwire Presents for helping us make this happen. You all have been fantastic in supporting IGB. And Lauren, thank you so much.
No, thank you, Jay and Dan. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure talking to you guys, honestly.
You're always welcome to come back. Tape Drive, the Discord is discord.gg/indiegame.business. Just Google Indie Game Business. I promise you a lot of stuff is going to come up. And if you are coming in late, this is always available on our YouTube, on the podcast. And with that, we're going to let everybody go. Thank you much, and we will see you next week.
Bye.